Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Girish Karnad's Hayavadana, or Hayavadana. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I don't know which is correct, if one is correct and the other is incorrect, or what the situation is. With a lot of South Asian text names, I've heard them pronounced multiple ways by people who are in a position to know how they should properly be pronounced. So I'm going to be referring to it as Hayavadana. If that's wrong, I'd love to have people explain in the comments how it's actually pronounced. But Karnad is a really interesting contemporary Indian playwright. He was raised largely after Indian independence and the partition with Pakistan. And so a lot of Karnad's artistic work, philosophical work, creative work, etc., deals with the sort of, not directly the politics necessarily of post-colonial India, but the cultural politics in a way. And Hayavadana's in that tradition. This is a story profoundly concerned with hybridity. So that's really, really important in contemporary, in post-colonial philosophy. It shapes post-colonial arts because one of the big questions that emerges in newly independent nations following eras of colonialism is, how do you navigate the competing cultural forces between the culture often largely lost of pre-colonial, in this case India, versus British colonial metropolitan culture. A country like India was profoundly reshaped by colonialism. Indian culture was, by 1947, no longer the culture of pre-contact India, which of course itself was a hybrid of various cultural forces. But the point is, India, by the time independence and partition come around, is is Anglo-inflected country. And so European culture, European literature, European arts shape the way that Indians see the world, shape the way that Indian elites think about culture, about ruling, about or governing, whatever it is, all of these things. And so Karnad is interested in those structures of cultural and political hybridity. He was even awarded the, let me find it here, because I'm reading this in the Methuen Drama Anthology of Modern Asian Plays. He was a recipient of a Homi Bhabha Fellowship in 1970 to 72. And Homi Bhabha, who's one of the most influential post-colonial thinkers, one of my personal favorite post-colonial theorists, he is a theorist of cultural hybridity. He is interested in how post-colonial nations navigate the impulse to return to pre-colonial cultures versus the impulses of maintaining things that they have been that have been sort of imposed through the education system, that have been imposed through Western government, etc., British government in the case of India. How do you maintain these cultural forces? Because the reality is that you can't go back to pre-colonial culture. You have to figure out how to navigate a world in which, in this case, British culture has been central to the way your country has been run for a couple of centuries. So that's really important for understanding Hayavadana. According to the introduction in the Matthewan Anthology, the central plot in Hayavadana is based on a tale found in the Katha Sarit Sagar, the ocean story. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. I apologize. A collection of Sanskrit stories dating from the 11th century, and on its further development in Thomas Mann's 1940 German novella, The Transposed Heads. Thus, Hayavadana's origins are intergeneric, a folktale transformed into a novel, into a play, and intercultural. The story traveled from India to Germany and back again. That's really, really interesting. We have that intergeneric and intercultural transpositions. We also have this bit that comes in a little bit into the play. So there's a frame narrative, primarily driven by a Bhagavata, who, as I understand it, and this may be wrong, is part of a religion that somewhat merged with Hinduism, like long ago, like BCE era. But this religion is less sort of high church, less sort of ritual, less sort of religious officialdom, and more of a folk religion. That's my understanding of it. So that may be wrong. That's almost certainly oversimplified, if nothing else. But my understanding is that the Bhagavata is a religious leader who is in a parallel sort of tradition to mainstream Hinduism that is more oriented toward like folk culture, localized ritual, things like this. And he meets this guy named Hayavadana. Hayavadana initially actually confronts an actor who's late for the play and who is going to pee on the road because he didn't want to sort of stop and go off the road. And Hayavadana called him out. It was like, that is not proper manners. Hayavadana, so the reason that this startled the actor and the reason that he ran to the theater to get the attention of the Bhagavata is that Hayavadana has the body of a man and the head of a horse. And what we find out when the Bhagavata asks Hayavadana, basically the Bhagavata's first sort of impulse is, who have you wronged to experience this horrible curse? And Hayavadana is indignant about this because he has wronged no one. What he says, basically he tells this story where his mother was a princess and princes came from all over the world. He says from China, from Persia, from Africa, but she didn't like any of them. The last one to come was the Prince of Araby. My mother took one look at that handsome prince sitting on his great white stallion, and she fainted. Now, the first conclusion that the actor and the Bhagavata draw is that the mother was in love with the prince from Araby. Wrong. The mother is in love with the white stallion. She wasn't the mother at the time. The princess was in love with this white stallion. She refused to marry anyone but this white stallion. Because she was a princess, they were married. And then it says, she lived with him for 15 years. One morning she wakes up and no horse. In its place stood a beautiful celestial being, a Gandharva. Apparently this celestial being had been cursed by the god Kubera to be born a horse for some act of misbehavior. After 15 years of human love, he had become his original self again. The Bhagavata says, I must admit several such cases are on record. Hayavadana says, released from his curse, he asked my mother to accompany to his heavenly abode, but she wouldn't. She said she would come only if he became a horse again, so he cursed her. The actor says no. Hayavadana says, he cursed her to become a horse herself. So my mother became a horse and ran away prancing happily. My father went back to his heavenly abode. Only I, the child of their marriage, was left behind. So even in the frame story, we have this introduction of a hybrid character, a character whose head does not match his body. And this is the source of Hayavadana's sorrows. He wants to be complete. He wants his head to match his body. And so the Bhagavata ends up sort of suggesting, here's a temple that you can go to. The deity there, I think it's a temple at Kali. Yeah, Kali of Mount Chikrakut. The Bhagavata recommends that Hayavadana go to this temple of Kali because she is renowned for always granting requests. So Hayavadana sets out to do this, and then the play itself starts. The play is focused on the interactions of three characters, basically. Oh, the other thing I should say, before we actually get to the first Hayavadana sequence, the Bhagavata sets up on a chair that's at center stage a mask of the god Ganesha. Ganesha is one of the most important gods in Hinduism, and along with the musicians, the Bhagavata opens the play with a prayer to Ganesha, and then this sort of invocation. He says, May Vishganeshwara. There's a lot of different names for the same deities in Hinduism. So we've already got Hiramba and Vishnagawara, Vigneshwara. I'm pronouncing all these things wrong, just so you know. I don't speak Hindi. You may be shocked. I don't speak any Indian languages. I'm doing my best. I apologize. This is not intended to be religiously insensitive. But this is what the Bhagavata says. Vishnagawara, the destroyer of obstacles, who removes all hurdles and crowns all endeavors with success, bless our performance now. How indeed can one hope to describe his glory in our poor disabled words? So we have introduced here for the first time the idea of limitation, of the failure of completion, the failure of something to be complete, to succeed at what it is meant to do. Then he goes on, and he talks about Ganesha. An elephant's head on a human body, a broken tusk, and a cracked belly. Whichever way you look at him, he seems the embodiment of imperfection, of incompleteness. How indeed can one fathom the mystery that this very Vakratunda Mahakaya, with his crooked face and distorted body, is the lord and master of success and profession? Could it be that this image of purity and holiness, this Manglamurti, intends to signify by his very appearance that the completeness of God is something no poor mortal can comprehend? Be that as it may, it is not for us to understand this mystery or to try to unravel it, nor is it within our powers to do so. Our duty is merely to pay homage to the elephant-headed god and get on with our play. And so the theme, again, of hybridity as seeming imperfection, seeming incompleteness, is introduced. After that, the Bhagavata introduces the principal characters of the play, three principal characters, the two great friends Devidata and Kapila. Devidata is handsome. He is a scholar, a very brilliant scholar, but because he is of the Brahmin class, he is not, like, his body is reasonably weak. He's got a scholar's body. I also have a scholar's body. Though Devidata isn't as large as I am. Devadatta seems to be quite a slim guy, with sort of soft, delicate hands, stuff like this. Yeah, he's a nerd. He's a handsome nerd. Then you've got Kapila. He is much, much more muscular. He's not dumb. He's not well educated. He's got some ability to sort of understand, appreciate, and even write poetry, but he's not great at it. But he's really, really good at physical tasks. He is a wrestler. He is able to climb trees. He's able to run long distances. All of these things. So those are the two friends. They're best friends. Like they're like brothers, basically. Then we've got Padmini. She is the most beautiful woman that either of them has ever seen. They're both instantly in love with her at first sight. Devadatta has seen her first, and he sends his friend to go and sort of find out who she is. Kapila, when he sees her, when he goes to her house to sort of ask about who she is and try and initially create that interest to potentially marry Devadatta, he falls in love with her as well. She marries Devadatta, which is what the plan had been. Kapila doesn't feel like he can sort of impose his own feelings here because that would hurt his friend, and so he supports them. But Padmini becomes really interested in Kapila's body because, again, he's very muscular, he's very fit, he's very physically active, etc., etc. And she kind of falls in love with him while also still being in love with Devadatta. So you've got your classic love triangle. Devadatta comes to suspect this mutual attraction on their part, and he becomes jealous and resentful. They are out one day, they're going on a trip to this fair, and they stop to have a break, and Kapila tells Padmini and Devadatta that there are some temples nearby. One is a temple to the god Rudra, and the other is a temple to Kali. Devadatta, before marrying Padmini, had promised that if the gods let him marry Padmini, he would sacrifice his arms to Kali and his head to Rudra. Now he is depressed because Padmini is interested in Kapila, and so he decides that he is going to go and cut off his head at the temple of Kali. This is a sticking point, in part because he had promised his head to Rudra and his arms to Kali. But nonetheless, Devadatta, in his grief and anxiety and sadness, apparently forgets that minor detail. He goes to the temple of Kali, he finds there a sword, and he cuts his head off, claiming that he is honoring his promise. While that is going on, Padmini and Kapila had gone to see the temple of Rudra. They come back to the cart to look for him. Kapila goes up to the temple of Kali to see if Devadatta has gone there. He finds his friend's body. In grief and remorse, Kapila cuts his own head off. Eventually, Padmini goes up to the temple, and she is trying to cut her head off. She's not strong enough to do it. She's going to try and stab herself through the torso. When she hears from the altar the voice of Kali telling her to stop. What we have here then is stage directions, a tremendous noise of drums. Padmini shuts her eyes in terror. Behind the curtain, one sees the uplifted, blood-red palms of the goddess. The curtain is lowered and taken away, and one sees a terrifying figure. Her arms outstretched, her mouth wide open with the tongue lolling out. The drums stop, and as the goddess drops her arms and shuts her mouth, it becomes clear she has been yawning. So, Kali is sleepy because no one has been coming to her temple anymore. Bizarrely enough, because she grants the wishes of those who come and invoke her. She says that, she says that the reason she did not intervene when Devidata and Kapila were killing themselves is because they lied. Devidata claimed that he was sacrificing his head for Kali to keep his promise, but he didn't promise her his head, he promised her his arms. He promised Rudra his head, and so he lied. He also lied about why he was doing it. It wasn't to keep his word, it was out of grief, jealousy, and anger at Padmini and Kapila's mutual attraction. Kapila claimed that he was doing it out of remorse, but really he, according to Kali, he killed himself to avoid the accusation that he had murdered Devidata in order to be with Padmini. Padmini was the only one who was honest about why she was going to kill herself, because what she said is, so she was sad that they were both dead, but she did say, home, and what shall I say when I get there? What shall I say happened, and who'll believe me? They'll all say the two fought and died for this whore. They're bound to say it. Then what'll happen to me? No, Mother Kali, no, it's too horrible to think of. No, Kapila's gone, Devidata's gone, let me go with them. So because Padmini was honest that she wants to kill herself because she does not want people to think that she was having an affair with Kapila that drove Devidata and Kapila to fight to the death, that it is that she should kill herself. Kali admires her honesty and is like, all right, you put the heads back on the bodies, touch the sword to their necks, and I will bring them back to life. Which she does. Padmini does this. The problem is she puts the wrong heads in the wrong bodies. So Devidata's head, with all his scholarly knowledge and stuff, goes on to Kapila's muscular body. Kapila's head, with his lack of knowledge and poetic ability and whatnot, goes on to Devidata's comparatively weak, feeble, shittier body. This creates a problem, because now the question becomes, whose husband is Padmini? Kapila, the person with Kapila's head, claims that Padmini is his wife because he has Devidata's body, and Devidata's body is the body that she married, the body that got her pregnant, etc., etc. Devidata, the person with Devidata's head, that is, claims precisely the opposite, that the head is the person's identity. The head is the truth of who they are, and he has Devidata's head, and therefore Padmini is his wife. This creates quite a rift between the two. Padmini, for not entirely unselfish reasons, wants Devidata's head, which is the smarter head, and Kapila's body, which is the sexier body. So she is getting what she wants. The guy with Kapila's head and Devidata's body is ending up with nothing, because he doesn't have the intelligence and he doesn't have the physical abilities that he had. So they go to a religious leader, a cleric or someone like this, who determines that Devidata's head is the one that really is Padmini's husband. So Devadatta, the person with Devadatta's head, who is just called Devadatta from that point out, Devadatta takes Padmini, goes home. Kapila goes off and lives by himself in the woods. And what ends up happening is, as Devadatta has Kapila's body, Kapila's strength and the sort of toughness of his skin, etc., all start to wane. Devadatta's body transitions, the body that Devadatta now has transitions back to the type of body he had originally had. Whereas out in the woods, Kapila initially struggles with Devadatta's much weaker body, but he builds muscle. His body gets tougher. He is able to run longer. He's able to climb trees to collect fruit, etc., etc. And so they end up basically back where they had started, which recreates the problem. Padmina is now... So she goes out into the woods to find Kapila, and she discovers that he has the body that she was attracted to again. And so the play portion ends with them having a sword fight. They kill one another, and then Padmina builds them a pyre and lights herself on fire with their bodies, which is historically not an uncommon thing for wives in India to do, to be immolated with their husbands' bodies when their husbands die before them. I think this is now less and less common. But what we get is this difficulty of navigating hybridity, right? Because Devadatta and Kapila are each made unhappy by their bodies, and Kapila and Padmini is made unhappy by wanting the elements of each, but being unable to genuinely have them. So it is only when the three of them are sort of destroyed together that they're able to overcome this problem of the incompleteness of their existences, of their identities. The play itself, the larger play, Hayavadana, Hayavadana, ends when we go back to the frame story, back to the Bhagavata. Another actor comes in telling this story of how he was terrified because as he was sort of on the road, he heard singing, and he went to go see who was singing, and it was a horse who was singing. And the Bhagavata naturally assumes that this was, what he means is that this was a person with the body of a human and the head of a horse. No, turns out, turns out Hayavadana had gone to the temple of Kali and had made his request, make me complete. Kali fell asleep before he could say, make me a complete man, and so she made him a complete horse. With the exception of he still has a human voice. And then by the end of the play, Hayavadana's human voice starts to dissipate, and he moves toward becoming a complete horse, which is, becomes now a source of joy for him. He has a complete whole identity built out of that hybridity.